Welcome everyone to the third installment of our four-part webinar series that we are running called Chaos to Clarity about building a unified data strategy on Azure. For those of you who were here for the first two sessions, and I see a few familiar names, so it's great to have you guys back. And for those of you joining us for the first time, welcome. We will be sharing the recordings of the first two sessions in the chat. So if you guys would like, you can check those out after this session as well. So just to get started with some quick housekeeping items, like the previous sessions, this session will be recorded as well. And we'll share the recording after this by email to anyone who registered. As you guys will notice, we have muted everyone's mics and turned off the cameras. But we do encourage engagement. So please feel free to put any questions you have in the Q&A panel or in the chat, and we'll get to them towards the end of the webinar. If we don't get time to cover everyone's questions, we will collate all of them and send out the responses after via email. And if there's anything else that you want to learn more about that you see or hear today, we also still have a few sessions left of the free assessment sessions that we are offering. You can also reach out to any of us at info@optimusinfo.com, and that email address will be in the chat as well. So just to introduce our speakers for today. So my name is Vaibhav Mao. I'm the Vice President here at Optimus. And I'm joined with Neha Sharma. She is a returning speaker from last time. So Neha is a data and AI specialist at Microsoft, and her main focus is on Microsoft Fabric and cloud-based data and AI solutions, and how to really use those to accelerate your digital transformation and enable the insights. She gave a great session last week on Fabric. You can check that out in the recordings that I mentioned, and she'll be talking today on Power BI. So really grateful for her to take some time out and join us again today. So just before we get started, a quick reminder about Optimus and who we are. We are a Azure-only partner based out of Vancouver. We've been around for almost 14 years. And in that time, we've had the opportunity to work with a lot of customers all across North America. And what we really, really pride ourselves on is that we take a very partnership-centered approach. One of the metrics that we are most proud of is that we have multiple customers that we have more than 100,000 hours plus of engagement with. So really, what we focus on is becoming an extension of your internal team and really becoming a trusted advisor. And the way we do that, we support you with delivery centers all throughout the world. We have offices in India, in Argentina, and Brazil. And then, of course, here in Canada, we have offices in Vancouver and Toronto. On the services side, as I mentioned, we are very Azure and Microsoft focused. We have three pillars that we really focus on, which is the cloud infrastructure, the app development, and data and AI. And within all three of those, we go, right from the start to the end. So like right from the understanding of your needs to kind of help design a solution, to implement that solution, and then help you with the ongoing management, maintenance, and future upgrades of that system. So again, like I had mentioned earlier, we really, really want to focus on that journey with you, go on that with you, and grow with you. And we do have all these Microsoft certifications. You can see what that means is that Microsoft audits us every year to make sure that we are delivering the projects and the work in a way that they deem as best practice. Now coming to the webinar and this series that we are running, as I mentioned, this is session 3 of a 4-part webinar series. And just to kind of recap what we are trying to cover and accomplish with these webinar series is really address, the key challenges that we're seeing in the market today when it comes to data and AI, right? What we see is organizations typically end up happening like, siloed data. and lack of formal governance structures around that data, and also, which leads to inefficient or even in some cases unavailable reporting and analytics. So how do we take organizations who are finding themselves more and more in that space to a more modern data strategy, right? Something that is more cohesive and really allows for almost real-time analytics, and more as we see how can that be powered by the AI tools that are available. So there's the four steps that we've identified as at Optimus, based on the work that we've done. The first one, which was the first session we ran in this series, was about unifying the data estate. How do we take all these separate data sources that you have and kind of bring them all into one place and consolidate them using tools like AIS. The second step after consolidating those is what we saw in the last session, is how do we use tools like Fabric to really transform and manage that data, right? To completely unlock the power of that data that you have. And then the third step, which is what we're going to cover today, is then once you have all that data that's transformed, how do you expose that to your customers and really empower them to kind of get the insights and actionable items that they need from that using tools like Power BI and Copilot. And then the last key piece of that, which we'll see in the next session, is how you do this in a secure way, surrounded by a good governance policies using tools like Purview. So that's kind of the overview of this webinar series. What we've been doing across this webinar series is kind of following a typical customer through this journey. The customer that we've kind of been following, is a mid-size retail chain. They have around 50 stores, brick and mortar stores, and that's supported by an e-commerce platform. And the challenges, when we first engaged with them were exactly as we discussed earlier, right? They had siloed systems, they have, their point of sale system, CRM, e-commerce platform. All the data from that is kind of completely separate, not talking to each other. Because of that, they have the lagging analytic problem, right? So they can't get real-time and actionable insights from data all across. Like there's no cohesive view across all of that. And then, of course, because there's no single source of truth for their data, that leads to a lot of vulnerability and security risks as well. So what we've seen so far in this webinar and kind of where we left them at the end of last session was they started at the start of their journey. They used the Azure integration services. They brought all their data from all those systems we saw, the POS, e-commerce, CRM, financial data. They brought it all into Fabric. After they brought it into Fabric, and we saw using the capabilities, the transformation, the data science, and the analytics capabilities of Fabric, what they were able to do was really put it all together and get the insights, right? And so the examples that we spoke about last time were how they kind of took, their footfall traffic data and mapped it with their POS data to kind of see, what happens at peak times, what products are selling at, when during those times. Similarly, they also brought in weather data to see how, weather patterns affect those trends. And then even similarly, demographic data, right? And how different sets of people behave in different scenarios, which also allows them to kind of model for future growth. So that's kind of where we've left this customer in our last session. Where we're going to pick up from today is now that they've really unlocked all this data, how do they kind of then now empower their users to kind of now themselves be able to kind of drive the insights and action items that they need from that, right? And how do they use tools like Power BI and Copilot to extract that value from that data? And to talk about that, I'm going to hand it off to Neha. So over to you, Neha.
Awesome. Thank you, Vaibhav. I'm just gonna quickly go to my next screen. So welcome everyone to today's session. It's going to be looking at Power BI and Fabric, but thank you guys for joining me today. Today's session is really going to be focused on unlocking value from your data with Power BI and Fabric. Now, Power BI is part of Fabric, so that's kind of why I wanted to start there. This seems very straightforward, so let's just start talking about Power BI and kind of, where we've come in this journey with Power BI. So Power BI is now nearly 10 years old. And since the beginning of the tool and the product, It's always been about driving a data culture. So that's really what our product teams are really investing in, and our executives as well. Every person in their day-to-day job, the way that we see it, every team, every individual really working together to make a decision. We want to make sure that they're able to leverage it in their different roles and at any scale, right? So whether your business is small or large, it really helps to make decisions that are data driven at every point of that journey. So with context related to Microsoft Fabric, which was introduced in the last session, we talked about it a little bit briefly, but Fabric takes this vision to another level, right? So we have the Power BI stack, and then we've got Fabric, which actually includes Power BI. So it's a comprehensive suite of data tools. We talked a little bit about this last time, but the way I would think about Fabric and really where it plays is it's like Microsoft Office, right? So it's a suite of products where each tool has a specific task, but it shares a common user experience. It shares a common governance, shares common foundational, like collaboration features, right? So think of it like it's a suite for analytics tools, whether that's for integrating your data, building a data warehouse, or analyzing your data with Power BI. And each of these tools in Fabric shares those common elements, right? So how your data is being connected to how you're managing artifacts in workspaces and how you move from different environments as well. Now, Power BI is key to this platform, right? We talked a little bit about this already, but more importantly, you want to get the value out of your data, and that's really where Power BI comes into play. So today we're going to focus on how you can do that and what we're doing in terms of innovating with Power BI, because it's been a standalone product for a long time, but specifically looking at Power BI and Copilot and kind of how the two work together and how it connects to that larger Microsoft Fabric ecosystem. Now, here's some background on the journey we've been on in the last 10 years. I think it's really good context to have, but Power BI has continued to grow like crazy over the years, right? So we have over 375,000 customers here, like you see on the slide. 95% of Fortune 500 companies are using it, and it's all thanks to our community, you guys, right, our customers. And one of the cool things we've seen here is that since we launched Fabric in June, we've seen this adoption actually go higher and higher, right? So it's accelerated the pace of the usage when it comes to Power BI. And the reason I wanted to share this with you is really because if you currently are a Power BI user, especially if you have premium capacity, you actually already have access to Fabric, to all of the tools that we've been talking about over last session and this session. And you're also already licensed for Fabric. And in case you don't have a premium capacity, you have a pro license or a different type of license, you can actually sign up for a 60-day trial for Fabric at any point. And that should be a way for you to kind of get in there, play around, and actually start using some of the tools. Now, before I start to dive into some of the demos, I just wanted to highlight customer examples essentially to make it super real as to some of the areas of investments in an organization that are being made around this and sort of how we can see customer success, right? So Finastra is one of the largest pure play software vendors here in financial services. They look at empowering financial institutions for lending software, payment software, treasury, whether it be universal banking. And they have fully gone in on Copilot, whether that be Power BI Copilot or M365 Copilot. And I absolutely love this specific feedback we have on the slide. So from their head of marketing directly, what we heard is, look, they're talking about they had this marketing team and they had to hire a bunch of Power BI specialists to do analysis as an extension of that team, which really isn't their function, right? And now with Copilot, these marketing specialists can actually go into the system and just ask questions to get answers to data that they already have in the data team, and it's already existing across the organization, right? So it's really revolutionizing how people work with data and how quickly they can get to those insights. Another example that I love sharing is City of Oslo. They're using Power BI, they're using SharePoint, they're using Dataverse, right? So all sorts of systems, and they didn't have a unified view of any of these systems before and how they connect, right? Especially the data that resides across these various systems. So the example they sort of talk about and have provided as feedback when they worked with their account team is how one of their directors had to actually log into 25 different tools just to see data for their entire district, right? When it comes to school districts, like it's been very, very clunky. They had a lot of legacy systems, and so they've adopted Power BI and Fabric as well. And we're able to sort of have a single unified view into all of their systems and provide better services to their constituents and, of course, people across those different teams. Now, the next one here is the biggest announcement that we've had in the last year, right? So it's Copilot in that Power BI experience, right? And there's so much that Copilot enables us to do. It's part of the licensing, so it's not an add-on. And I'm a little under the weather, so keep in mind as I kind of go through this demo, just bear with me a little bit as I kind of walk through, but I may need to take a little bit of breaks as I walk through the demo. So this is where, whether it's data preparation, building reports, asking questions about the data, Copilot can really come in and elevate that experience. And we did a survey. So to give you a bit of background, we interviewed and actually had 200 people sit down and use Copilot versus standalone Power BI without the use of Copilot. And it was just amazing to see that in this example, Copilot users were actually 52% faster in completing those data analysis tasks. And then the insights themselves were actually 36% more accurate, right? So not only are they faster, but they're more accurate. They're getting more from their data, right? And 90% of these people said that they would use Copilot again. And the way that I've been thinking about is I imagine it's a feeling of, having to do something, being assigned a task and then being really good at it. And that feels fantastic, right? So I don't think you'd want to go back from that. So that's really the experience that we're looking to bring to business users. So let's kick off with a demo, and I'll give you a little bit of context as to report authoring with Copilot. But the demo you're about to see today is maybe one you've already seen before, but every year Microsoft gets asked to attend the Gartner Bake Off. So it's usually 3 vendors: Tableau, Microsoft, maybe Oracle. And we get asked to compete in a bake-off style for data. So they basically give us a data set and they go ready, set, bake. And our goal is to perform the best analysis, right? As a product team, that's really what we're looking to achieve. And this was one of the first years that our product teams actually came back to us and have shared that they absolutely crushed the opposition, right? And that was honestly, a lot of it had to do with Copilot because it was built into the experience. And there was a lot of questions and back and forth that they received. So we showed Copilot in a lot of the experiences, and I'm actually going to show you the demo today that we did for this that was shared back with us. So the theme of this year was on poverty data. So that's what we're going to show in the example. At the heart of it, the team started to look at Italy. They wanted to really focus on how Italy is dealing with poverty. And the reason why they picked Italy is if you look at this dashboard here, government public spending in Italy is their 5th place ranked out of the EU countries, right? If you look at population at the top there, they are, right, it's 60 million, right? And they're the 3rd actually largest population in the EU. And so if you look at other indicators like life expectancy, at GDP, and you kind of scroll through, what you'll realize is that specifically for poverty, they're ranked 44th place, right? So the thing that's interesting is if you drill down even more deeply, is that you'll get this nice little chart that it's about to go to right there. And you'll see a large divide between the North and the South. Now, a lot of people attribute this to the mafia, and we'll show you a demo today around what analysis can be done to understand what the link between poverty and some of the indicators are and why, perhaps maybe it's not mafia and maybe it is, right? So maybe some things are symptoms of the mafia. But now in Power BI today, if you wanted to go and do this, and you can actually go drill down, go to all the different features, eyeball it, right? Like I'm going through here. So economic condition, happiness, advanced population. But you're going to have to look at it one by one, explore each variable by variable, and just see how it correlates with poverty, right? So if you're feeling lazy or if you don't want to go through it, do that exercise of going through every single variable. Let's just, look at Copilot and give that a shot. So here, I'm going to go ahead and expand the data view. And you're going to see that I have over 1,000 measures of socioeconomic factors for Italy, right? So the list includes all of the data around population sizes, CO2 emissions, education attainment, health expenditures. If you look at the scroll bar, there's a number of different measures that I have. Now, going through every single variable and seeing how it relates to poverty is completely unreasonable, right? So this is where, like I said, I'm going to use Copilot to really help me with this analysis, and it's going to assist me through this entire journey. So I'm going to dock away the data pane, and I'm going to open up the Copilot pane. And the thing I love about Copilot here is that it gives me plenty of spaces to start, right? So it automatically gives me a little bit of what I can do with it. And I can say, can you suggest ways that I can, start with my report creation experience, right? When I click to expand, it actually tells me it can analyze economic performance, trade, population, health directly from within my data schema, right? And I'm going to choose economic analysis there, which takes a couple seconds, create a report. I love the fact that it knows the best way to measure economic performance is by looking at GDP over time, by the way. So just knows that from its domain understanding, right? There are certain things that it's been trained on. And if something is missing, right, like inflation, as an example, I can go ahead and ask Copilot to add it in. So here, I've asked Copilot to add inflation to this report. And when I hit enter, it automatically adjusts the report layout to bring the inflation field directly onto the report canvas, right? So it's just going to do that in a couple minutes, a couple seconds. In a few seconds, it's added, it's part of the report, and now I can actually move away from that Copilot pane and focus on what's on the report that's been created. Now, this gives me a good starting point to start analyzing economic performance trends directly, right? Using that Copilot experience. Now, Gartner likes to give us a challenge, right? So they might ask, hey, what if we give you a question and really you're supposed to answer that question from the data that we provided, right? So say it's your VP or someone else that asks this. So if I go to the Copilot pane again, and I start a new page, and in this case, I ask the question, can you examine poverty with health, right? Simple question, but requires a detailed answer. A lot of analysis in the background. So when I hit enter, Copilot actually goes through all of the data that's there on poverty and health. It's bringing relevant insights, and it's going to create a report that helps me to explore that relationship specifically that I asked for, right? Takes a couple seconds just because it is a large data model that I'm using for this one. It's processing all the combinations that are needed to render the report. And so once the report is ready, I want to draw your attention specifically to the blue chart at the top left corner, right? So one thing I learned from this example is the way to measure a country's performance on poverty is really to look at how much of the population can survive on $6, like $6 a day, right? $6.85 a day. So that's something interesting that I've now learned from this Copilot experience. And it's brought me the right value from my data model, which has 25 items, by the way, tagged under poverty, because it understands the domain really, really well, right? So it also brings in relevant health indicators like government health expenditure, undernourishment, life expectancy, suicide mortality rate, infant mortality rate, and it identifies those key metrics just by analyzing what's in the data set, right? So this is an assistive experience, and I can move the visuals around and relay out the content as I see fit. It doesn't have to stay like this. But it's really up to you as to how you want to create these reports, right? It's assistive. This is a starting point. Let's move things around. Let's organize it the way we want to and go from there. Excuse me. So another cool feature that I'm actually just making room for here is that if my VP or a director prefers, textual summaries over these visuals, and they just want like a snapshot of, hey, what am I looking at? Like, what's important? Give me the Coles notes, right? You can actually go in and use Copilot to summarize the data on the page in bullet point format or in full sentences. It's up to you. And then it can actually update the report with a summary. So it'll actually add that to the pane itself. And I can easily just even copy paste that if I'd like and send it over email. Now, my VP might come back and ask me, well, what year had the highest poverty rate, right? So I'm going to finish summarizing here first and just update. And that's what it looks like. I was just going to shorten some of those summaries because it was just a lot to give you an idea. And then it actually tells you, by the way, one thing I want to flag, where that data is coming from as well. So these are the little things we're doing to make sure that you can trust kind of the source of these summaries as well, and just the AI engine all up. Now, if I ask a question that my VP might ask, right? Like, what year had the highest poverty rate? Well, I can type this into Copilot, provides me an answer, along with the location, by the way, of the data as well in the response itself, not just the summaries, not what's in just the report, but even within the response that it's providing me. It tells me exactly where the data is coming from. And these are some of the measures that we take to make sure you trust the AI and you can easily navigate back to the source, right? Finally, sometimes the data model author forgets to add calculations. So we're moving on to this stage where, for instance, if I wanted to calculate the year-over-year change in poverty headcount, right, since 2015, normally I would take this report, I'd have to maybe export this to Excel just to do a little bit of digging myself, if I'm not like looking to publish it, just to get the answer quickly. With Copilot, I don't actually need to do any of that, right? I can perform the calculation directly within this experience. So I'm going to go do that now. And I just asked, hey, calculate the year-over-year change. And within seconds, it's going to render the table of results. So I'll just show you there. That's on the screen. So this really demonstrates how, Copilot enhances the end-to-end data journey, right? It's not just there from the perspective of, hey, like I made some really cool visuals. Yes, but the source is there. It's grounded in the data. There's summaries to help you understand the context. And then beyond that, you can perform additional calculations as well. So it's really helping you create meaningful insights and reports, right, more effectively. So these are some changes that you can leverage, some ways you can leverage Copilot in Power BI. And the most important factor when it comes to Copilot is having really good data, as we all know, right? So the AI is only as effective as the data it consumes. And a critical part of that data and the processing is the semantic model, right? The semantic model is where all of that business logic is stored, the relationships, the contextual information is stored, and things that often are maybe only in our heads, but we need to be able to define that. But it's just like how we calculate revenue, how we think about the business, right? So it's essential for creators using Power BI to spend time ensuring that they have strong semantic models. And this is really what serves as the backbone, as the foundation for all of the questions and reports that Copilot can generate, right? So if your semantic model is missing context and is missing information about your business and the way you view some of these metrics, it will show in the way that Copilot responds. So that's really what you want to focus on when you build that foundation. And we've heavily invested in tools to enhance in this space, to enhance the semantic model. So for example, you may have seen the DAX query view, right? We just recently shipped. It allows you to use Copilot to build DAX expressions, right? This is where we're really starting to enhance that experience. And if you've never worked with DAX before, it's easy to kind of get on board and learn that, right, throughout your journey. Now, starting in the next Power BI desktop release, we're actually introducing a feature called TMDL. This view allows you to create models in entirely new, super efficient ways. And I'm going to show you an example here. So quick demo on this, just to give you background to, is really when you start off with Power BI Desktop, the TMDL view is at the left pane, right? So you go into that view, and it's just a way of visualizing a model in a human readable format, right? So it allows you to make bulk changes really, really fast. And I'm going to go ahead here and you'll see that there's a new button on the left hand that we kind of covered. It's a code first view, right? I'm scrolling through some of this. This is code first. I can just drag in tables. That's kind of what I just did to bring up this code. Any columns, any measures, I can drag that in. And I can see the exact script that produced that portion of the model. And then in this case, I can drag in a table. You can see all the measures that are defined, and I can drag in individual tables as well, or columns as well if I wanted to, right? So in this case, I'm selecting column age. But let me tell you why I might want to do that. So if you script some tables that you want to quickly modify, right? In this case, maybe you want to update, you want to add a measure. I'm going to try to add a measure. So if you want to add a group of measures really quickly, I can do that inside this TMDL view. So if you wanted to quickly do a total, right? You can a sum, an average, a cumulative total. You can go directly inside this view here. And the great thing is at the very top, you can hit apply after. So just going to make those changes. That's what I've done here. Average. Excuse me. And I'm going to hit apply. So I pause this, it's working on that. But just so you're aware, when you click that button, all of the changes are done in one go. So it's not actually like sitting there and waiting for each measure to be updated. Probably familiar with that experience anyway, but just good to know. But it does it in a bulk operation, right? Another cool thing is I can take something that I've created from previous projects, and that's what you just saw there in that sort of TMDL view, like 3 of them. And I clicked on one. This is just me using something that's already been created by perhaps a different team, right? Previous project maybe that I worked on. So in this case, I created a calculation group, as you can see. And it has all of the time related dimensions. So year to date, month to date, and so forth, right? You can just copy paste this into your view here. Click apply at the very top. And now I've added a reused calculation group in this model, as you can kind of see. So it's all been added there. So I can expand out and I can show you this calculation item, and they've got year to date, month to date, quarter to date directly inside this experience. And now the final thing that I'm doing here is actually a lot of what people struggle with is they want to document the model, right? They want to be able to have descriptions, right, for what they're doing and what each of those different columns mean, what the tables are defined as. So I can easily actually use Copilot to document my entire model. You can say, can you summarize? In this case, I'm just saying set descriptions for all of the measures used in the model, right? I hit enter and it gives me this nice thing. You'll see there, if I go over to the side, right, I haven't applied anything. It just tells you like very blanket, like, oh, it's product category. That's it. It doesn't really tell me what the product category is. It doesn't give me a description. So for none of them, I have a description, but I just applied. And now you can see that it'll say description of the product category is it contains contains this, it contains the name of the product, contains the unique identifier. So that's kind of what I've done there. And it just makes it so that you can go back. It's human readable descriptions that have been added to the model, and now anyone else working off of this now knows, what those tables are for, what those descriptions are for, what those columns are for, right? Now, the last thing that I will show you in this view is that sometimes people speak different languages, right? And especially here in Canada, I know I've got a bunch of customers that speak French. I cover public sector, so a lot of customers may prefer to go back and forth between the two, right? So in this case, I'm going to translate the model into, just missed it here, into French, and you'll see what it does. So it says your model has been translated. And if you go to the bottom, I'm going to scroll through this. Oh, glitched again. It's right there. Did it right here. Okay. So it's just going to ask it to translate. And super quickly, I'm going to remove that. It just shows you all of the different descriptions that have now been translated. Anything on there, the model's been translated, right? So it gives you a little bit of, hey, this is what the caption is. It actually is translating even like sales amount, that's the measure. And then it's giving you a description for that, which is super, super neat, right? So directly within the model, the language of choice, it doesn't have to be French. And so you can use any language. I just chose French for convenience. And now if I go into the Power BI service and I hit apply here, and I can refresh the report, and that metadata that we were looking at will now come in French. So you can see some of these measures at the top, right? It's written in French. So it's just the metadata, by the way, that's been changed, right? Everything's not included here. Like as in the visuals have not been translated, right? So some of the report things you might still see, for example, number of customers, etc. It's not the report that's been translated, it's just the metadata. So anything that we changed that I just updated has been updated to French. So for those of you that have been building semantic models for a really long time, this feature specifically, or this way of interacting with some of the data and actually doing some of the work is really a fan favorite for sure, right? And just like you saw with Copilot, kind of helping you create different things like descriptions, that all feeds directly into Copilot, by the way, like back into Copilot. So when you agree or apply a change and you have a description, all of the summaries and the descriptions are feeding back into Copilot so that when the end user asks a question, those descriptions are actually helping provide Copilot even more context, right? Now it has even more to go off of, and that's super helpful. Now, another thing I wanted to call out is an announcement we made this week. Fabric AI capacities. It's been all the talk, I know internally, especially as well. We ourselves have a lot of questions. But when it comes to using Copilot, we license it through F64 capacities or P1 at this point, right? So premium capacities. Now, this is because those capacities are the ones that allow for broader distribution of Power BI reports across the organization. So if there's a lot of users that are on Pro, unfortunately, previously, you wouldn't have access to that, right? Unless you are working on a report that exists in a premium capacity. Now, with this, you don't have to assign your reports in those workspaces. It doesn't have to be in a premium capacity, but if you're worried about, especially like overloading your existing capacity with a bunch of end users asking Copilot questions, that can potentially throttle your production workspace, right? That performance. So when this is where AI capacities essentially comes in. So today with capacities, you can associate one to your workspace. For example, if I give like Paul or Vaibhav access to this capacity, no matter what report they're looking at or how or what content they're accessing, they can actually use a capacity that's associated with them, right? Regardless of where it's stored. It doesn't have to be a premium workspace. So if it's a pro license, that's okay. It's a pro, it's made on a pro workspace, that's okay. They can actually use that capacity to interact with Copilot and use it along the way. And so this allows you to do two things, right? First, to broadly distribute AI to your users, and second, to experience, maybe experiment with different isolation strategies. So maybe there's a specific set of pro users you want to allow access to versus a different team that you don't want them to have access to this functionality yet. Again, just strategizing where in the business it makes sense to do so. So that could be something that you can look into as well. Now let's switch gears a little bit and talk about Power BI as the center between Office and Fabric, right? So a lot of people have asked us and asked me, where does Power BI sit? When I look at my licensing, it's under Power Platform. When I look at Fabric, it says Power BI. We also have the premium capacities previously, right? And then there's Office, but with M365 E5, I get Power BI Pro. So lots of questions around kind of where that sits. Does it sit with all, right? And the answer is just a resounding yes. Like it sits in all of these places. And really, it's because you want to visualize it as the internal kind of part in the middle of everything. It acts as a bridge, right? And in this section, I'm going to actually share why you can think of Power BI as a bridge and why we've licensed it in so many different ways, and giving you some different flavors and capabilities, right? So I'm going to talk about how it serves as sort of the bridge to business users. And these business users often do live in Office applications, right? So that's an example. Now, if we're taking care of a lot of, you know, integrating, what we're doing is we're integrating a lot of Power BI into nearly everything, all of our Office applications, right? So you'll find it in Teams, you'll find it in Excel, you'll find it in SharePoint, you'll find it in Power BI, in PowerPoint and Outlook, right? So Power BI is really going to be everywhere. And that's because we want to ensure data gets to users when and where they're making decisions, right? Where they're doing their work, right? So here you can kind of see, this is just a running kind of video of the screen, but here you can see an example of Power BI embedded in Teams. It's not just embedded, it's actually a built-in feature. So it includes features of its own, like notifications. It's actually integrated. So when someone shares something with you, you get a notification on Teams, just like you would if they send a note or a ping, right? This makes the experience feel more natural, and it really helps to remind users that the data is there for them. It's easily accessible where they need it, right? They don't actually have to go to a dashboard. You can look at it right within. You can see what your scorecard is. And you can see all these different elements that are playing a role here, right? So this individual here had a notification, someone edited a report. They can, build in all of the different components of the report to their meetings. You can access it from various components. But again, that user journey and the integration with all of that Office, all of our Office stack, that's really what's going to help enable all of the business users get accustomed to Power BI and really have insights and data where they need it and when they need it the most. And when we see our customers leveraging those Power BI and Office integrations, right, there are 2 to 3.5 times more engaged as new users, right? And that's because where, they're already doing work, that's where they're accessing the data, right? They don't need to change their habits. It's actually very much meeting them where they are. So, excuse me. Now, in terms of new capabilities in Power BI, what we want to focus on, and we will continue to innovate on, is really streamlining the distribution of enterprise data, right? Because again, all of the work that you do to build a beautiful semantic model, to get the data into a form that's ready to be consumed, you need to make sure that it gets to users, that they can access it, and that they're really easily reusing a lot of the work that your data teams are doing without having to start from scratch every time, right? So that's really the goal here. So the capability here I want to talk about is Fabric Metrics Hub, and this is available today. It allows you to do, what it allows you to do is really take your existing semantic models and think of those like really, really large semantic models that you may have built. At Microsoft, I'll give you a personal example. We have something called MS Sales. I used to do operations and analytics back in the day when I was an intern here. So we had a massive semantic model, MS Sales. It still exists, and it is this massive model that runs our entire sales business, like everything. Has all of the revenue that we've generated, all the product types, subcategories, sub-product categories, licensing, everything. And if you look at it, you wouldn't even know where to start in terms of like which model to use, which table, which column. So when it comes to the metrics hub, you can really create those mini semantic models, right? So these mini semantic models can allow you to kind of partition your larger semantic models into logical components that are consumable by your end users and other creators as well across the organization, right? So this means you can create different segments, if you will, and deploy them to various parts of the organization without providing being able to provide actually an amazing consumption experience. So that's part of the reason why we're working on this, and users will know exactly which dimensions and measures to use, right? So this is really exciting capability. And I have a demo for this here as well that I've recorded. So let's explain the metrics hub and how to use it. I'm going to start off in Power BI, and I'm just going to go and create a new metric set. You'll now be able to see the ability to create, a new type of artifact, which we didn't have before. So I'm going to give it a name. That's how, and then I will just hit create. As you can see, blank new canvas, new metric set. I can give it a description. So I've done that, I pasted that here, and I can choose a contact or owner, as I mentioned earlier. I can actually add metrics directly from this experience inside this experience, right? So I can open the data hub. That's where I am right now. And I can see all my data sets, and I can choose the right semantic model. And now I'm selecting which measures I want to bring in. And I don't want to bring in the entire model. That's the whole point of the metric set. I don't want to use the entire model. I want to be very specific about the exact measures that I want to bring in. So in this case, I've selected revenue open, and I can create the metric. Now, a metric itself is normally useless, right? Unless you bring in the right dimensions. So now I can choose which dimensions a metric should be sliced by. And this is me helping, my consumer out, so they don't need to figure out the model, which dimensions are right to use. And in this case, I select, things like account name. Excuse me. Perfect. So I'm going to select account name. I've selected industry column, some industry column, and then I'm going to choose close date as well. That's going to be part of this. And the thing on the right-hand side, by the way, is very interesting. It shows you and generates sort of like a relevant visual based on the dimension that you've chosen and the measure that you're working with. And you can just start seeing the visuals slowly pop up and update. Now, if I'm a consumer, I go to my metrics hub, I can see all of the metric sets that I just created, right? In a single place. Now I can see all of the data, and I can see that metric and all the relevant dimensions. And Power BI organizes them based on what it thinks is interesting for me, right? So I can scroll through them. I can use Explore feature. That's where I'm at right now. It's also in preview. This allows me to quickly modify the data here, right? And I didn't like the metric set. So I want to see a metric with more than one dimension. I can easily do that through this Explore experience. So that's why I'm deselecting and selecting a few other things. And I've dragged the product group on the legend. And you can see that I chose a different visualization. I also dragged in close date, if you caught that as well in the dimensions. Then you're going to choose a chart type. And again, gives you full control, right? Now, the final thing that I'm going to show you here is sometimes your data scientists, for example, right? Not your analysts, but your data scientist team wants to connect with your data, right? And you're not sure exactly how, especially when you've changed and modified certain things. But you can use what we call fabric notebooks, right? You can use Python code to directly access that same metric that was created by, let's say, an analyst. So I can execute code here, and it gives me the metric, but I can also use the relevant dimensions, right? So in my Python code, I can specify the dimensions that are in the metric set without needing to really think twice about them. And now I have all of this rich data that actually has just been loaded directly into my Python experience to create any machine learning models or do any further analysis or enrichment. And this isn't creating shadow IT here, right? So that's what we really want to emphasize. The data scientists are accessing the same data that the users are seeing, right? It really helps to enable that collaboration amongst your analysts and your scientists. Now, yeah.
Hey, Nia, sorry, just doing a little quick time check. I know we have just a couple of minutes left. So what we can do, I know there's just a bit more details that you have around the SKUs and everything. We did also have a question around that, so maybe we can address just the remainder of that as part of that question that was asked about like capacities and how that AI works with it. And then maybe because I do want to be just mindful of everyone's time. But as you can see, back to this kind of journey map that we were at the start, right? What we were going through in this session was this number five here. We kind of took everything that they had. They had brought all their data in Fabric. They started transforming it, and now they started really leveraging the other side of Fabric, right? Because obviously Power BI, as Neha said, is also part of Fabric technically, and there are other components that she spoke about, and how to really expose that data out so that the users can, actually get the meaningful insights that they need, right? Now, and what that means for like our customer that we did, like in our case, it was like the manager that's opening the store, like, they have the data that they need to, okay, hey, typically, on this day every year, this is kind of what we see the trends, right? These are the products that we should put out up front, by the point of sale for those impulse buys. Or same with the closing manager of that day, right? Now they get to see that, hey, this is kind of what we did today, this is kind of what the weather is like supposed to be tomorrow, so maybe make sure you're staffed appropriately at this time, or kind of switch that around. And the key thing really there is that it's not only what data they want to see, it's also where they want to see it, right? Like as Neha was showing it, the Power BI can be, those reports are very flexible in where we can embed those or kind of bring them in. So it could be right into your point of sale system, it could be in some in-store displays. So it's really, really powerful insights and just getting them to the right people at the right time. So that's kind of where we are leaving this journey today. In our next session, so this is sorry, before we get to that, this is the FabCon that I did mention at the start of the session. We will share this code and the sign up link. It's going to be a pretty phenomenal event, I think. So if you guys do have an opportunity, or just someone from your team you think could benefit, feel free to register and use our code. You can get up to $200 off on the registration. And yeah, it's a great event. But getting back to kind of the webinar, the final session, right, will be now that we've kind of got all of this transformation and the data flow in place, how do we make sure now that our data is secure? How do we make sure we have all the data governance in place? And that we'll be covering in our next session on February 6th, which will be all about Purview and other security features that are available in Fabric. So thanks everyone for joining. I know we are a bit over. There were a couple of questions around the capacity. Neha, maybe you can quickly address it. Otherwise, we can send it later. It's about whether the F8
Yeah.
capacity has the AI available or not.
Yeah. Yeah, I just posted. So an explanation of that is just it's available in Power BI P1, which is now retired as of January 2025. So you're gonna have to move to a Fabric capacity if you're already on Power BI. But no, it's only available on F64 and above capacity. So minimum has to be F64 to enable Copilot.
Awesome. All right. I don't see any other questions. So thanks everyone for joining us again. And if there are any other questions, please feel free to reach out using the email that was shared, info@optimisinfo.com, and we will be happy to respond to any questions. All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.